The next item of business today is a members' business debate on motion number 4470 in the name of John Mason on Glasgow 2014, Scotland's Time to Shine. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. But would those members who wish to speak in the debate please press the request to speak buttons now. And may I remind again those members and indeed the public gallery to be as quiet as possible to allow this debate to proceed. Thank you. John Mason, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'll just speak more loudly if there's any noise in the background. I would like to thank all those members who signed the original motion and yourself and your colleagues, Presiding Officer, for allowing this debate to take place. The Commonwealth Games in 2014 have to be one of the most exciting events in Scotland for a very long time. The Games will run for 11 days from the 23rd of July to the 3rd of August 2014 and will involve some 17 sports at 14 venues. We expect to have over 4,500 athletes taking part from 71 nations, and of course Scotland will be taking part in her own right. With the London Olympics now in the past, many people's attention, I believe, is now switching to Scotland for 2014. And I certainly felt that on the 3rd of October this year, when we had a reception concerning the Games here at Holyrood, and many of us met the mascot Clyde for the very first time. I think, as I noted on that evening, it's very appropriate, given the footballing history of Glasgow, that we have a thistle as the mascot, and it is called Clyde. The venues are coming along well, on time and on budget. As the motion refers to, the Commonwealth Games Federation has been extremely positive as to how things are going in this respect. One of the reasons why Glasgow won the Games in the first place was because of the excellent facilities we already had in place. Other cities would have had to do much more to catch up, let alone match the progress that we have made since winning the bid. But of course we must not be complacent, and some of the venues inevitably have to come on stream quite late down the line, and Hampden Park's an example of that, where Queen's Park will be leaving the stadium and the athletics facilities need to be installed immediately before the Games. Speaking personally, I'm delighted that 5 of the 14 venues are in the Glasgow-Shettleston constituency. The Velodrome and Commonwealth Arena are now operational. Tollcross Pool is coming along, hockey at Glasgow Green, Celtic Park for the opening ceremony, and of course not least the Athletes' Village, which is hugely transforming that part of the East End of Glasgow and is going to leave us with social rented housing, a care home, as well as private homes. Other venues in Glasgow will include Ibrox for the rugby, Hampden for the athletics, Kelvin Grove for the bowling, Scotstoun for squash and table tennis, the SECC for 6 sports, and Cathkin-Braes for mountain biking. And then, of course, it's not just the Glasgow Games, and we do want to re-emphasise that outside Glasgow too there's activity, and that includes Strathclyde Park for the triathlon, the Commonwealth Pool in Edinburgh for the diving, and Ballybudden in Angus for the shooting. Now, another issue which is particularly topical this week is the start of the volunteer programme, where 15,000 volunteers are required. And it is now possible to register your interest as a volunteer, which I myself did yesterday, although the formal application process starts in January. And I gather that interviews will be going from April this year, next year, possibly running through to the beginning of 2014, and each volunteer will get around 3 days of training. And even within the volunteering, there are a variety of strands. Last Friday, I attended the launch of More Than Gold in Glasgow, and that's the umbrella body for the Church's involvement in the Commonwealth Games. One of the things they have done in previous Games is to offer hospitality for the families of athletes, because some of them, frankly, would not be able to afford accommodation here unless they were given some help in that regard. No major event like this would be complete without a few questions being asked along the way, and one of these I get from constituents is sometimes, could resources be better used elsewhere? Well, I think partly I touched on that already, because Glasgow had so many of the venues already in place that actually the investment we have had to put in has not been as big as other cities might have had to do, and that's a real plus point. Of course, I'm the first to argue for more investment in housing at every opportunity, but I think historically we have to realise that even housing in itself is not sufficient. And the example of areas like Easterhouse in the north east of Glasgow and other post-war schemes showed that even good quality housing on its own is not enough for a community and to give life to a community in a city. We need jobs, we need other activities to help us meet these targets, like improving physical activity and health. Another question that has come up has been the question of sponsors, and I think that was one of the problem areas when we had the Games in Edinburgh previously, that in fact there was a serious lack of sponsors, and right up till very shortly before the Games there were some challenges. So I think it's very encouraging at the number of sponsors that are already on board, and I believe with more to come, including absolutely Scottish-based companies like Harper McLeod, SSE and AG Bar, who people may know as the makers of Iron Brew. And just yesterday we had Emirates announced as an official sponsor, adding to their naming rights for the Emirates Arena, which includes, for clarification, both the Chris Hoy Velodrome and the Commonwealth Arena. I think there can be sometimes a bit of confusion over all these names and what they all mean, but we haven't lost the Chris Hoy Velodrome. That is part of the Emirates Arena. Now, it has been suggested that only good companies should be sponsors, while bad companies should be excluded. And I think my problem with that is how to define a good company and a bad company. I guess there is actually no company that is wholly good, and probably there is no company that is wholly bad. If we only put our pensions and savings into good companies, I suspect there might not be very many places to put them. But rather, I would suggest that, just like people, most companies are a mixture of good and bad, and it is encouraging that we are getting sponsorship coming in. The final area is really legacy. I think that's a word that has had its profile hugely increased through both the Olympics and now the Commonwealth Games. Obviously, the physical infrastructure, including the sporting infrastructure, the housing and transport infrastructure, are going to be the main lasting legacy. But we do want more than that. We want to encourage more people to be active. And it was interesting, the Age Scotland briefing for today's debate, which said that only 9% of older people are doing the recommended levels of physical activity. Can we increase that? Can we encourage it? I certainly hope we can. Of course, we're not always good at it in this building. We've got beautiful staircases, but many of us use the lifts. But we do have the opportunity through the Games to really increase physical activity in general and sports participation in specifically. So, Presiding Officer, I do thank the Chamber for this opportunity and hope we can all join in looking forward to and working towards the Commonwealth Games in Scotland in 2014. Thank you.
Excellent. Many thanks. Now call on Patricia Ferguson to be followed by Sandra White. 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I, in opening, congratulate John Mason for securing this debate today. It's always a pleasure to talk about sport in this chamber, but it's a particular pleasure to talk about the Commonwealth Games, an area where we have such cross-party consensus and such cooperative working in order to make our Games in 2014 the success that I'm sure they could be and will be. I too attended the reception in Parliament that Mr Mason refers to, and I too was intrigued by the fact we had a mascot named Clyde, who happened to be a thistle. I have to say that as a Partick Thistle supporter, I'm not 100% sure that that was a good idea, but joking aside, it is a fantastic mascot, and I congratulate very much the young citizen of Cumbernauld who made that possible. I think she and Clyde are both terrific ambassadors for the Games. John Mason is absolutely right to mention the fact that many of the venues were already in existence, and indeed, having been involved in the preparation of the bid, I am acutely aware that one of the very strong deciding factors in the government deciding at that time, the Scottish Executive deciding at that time to take forward the bid, was the fact that we were aware that the venues were 80% already available to us, and that some venues might need some refurbishment, but that we had very little comparatively to do in order to make the venues suitable for 2014. And I think it's also fair to say that consistently over the years, from the days when we were an aspirant bid city, through to being a potential host city, through to being the host city for 2014, that the assessment reports done by the Commonwealth Games Federation have been consistently good. And I think that's actually something that we don't recognise enough, because that doesn't just happen. That requires a great deal of work, both on behalf of the Government, the City of Glasgow, and the people that we have tasked with taking forward the bid and the preparation for the Games now on our behalf, and of course to the Commonwealth Games Council for Scotland, whose significance in the Commonwealth Games family, I think, shouldn't be underestimated, because it's their reputation that really has helped to get us to where we are today too. They're known to be strong supporters of the Federation, and that has paid off for Glasgow and for Scotland. I too look forward to welcoming the athletes, the families and the supporters to Glasgow. I am absolutely confident that they will have, frankly, the time of their lives, and that they will enjoy everything that Glasgow and Scotland has to offer. And like John Mason, I would very much like to be a volunteer at those Games too. Not least because I've always had an interest in the Games and been involved from an early point, but having been the recipient of the hospitality that Melbourne was able to offer in 2006 to those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to visit, I would like to be able to return the compliment. So I too am signing up to be a volunteer in 2014. Perhaps we could get an all-party group of MSPs to do so. It might be quite interesting, but only those who really want to work need apply, I'm told. I have to say that while I look around Glasgow and I'm delighted to see the new velodrome and the new arena and their wonderful facilities, I am slightly concerned that the north of Glasgow, where I represent, isn't really going to have any kind of tangible legacy from the Games. I hope that going forward that we do find ways of making the Games meaningful for people in the north of the city, since the idea of Firhill, Partick Thistle's ground, being part of the structure was dropped. There really hasn't been anything to replace that in the north of the city, and I think that's something we need to think about very seriously indeed. Of course, there is an excellent idea at the moment that the Pinkston Basin in my constituency might be the home of a paddle sports facility, which of course would be an excellent complement to the Games, but perhaps wouldn't be part of the Games themselves. Presiding Officer, in closing, I would just want to say that I am sure that the Glasgow 2014 Games will be a huge success. I am sure too that the success of those Games will be a real catalyst for what I hope will be a successful bid for the Youth Olympics in 2018 too. Thank you.
Many thanks. Now calling Sandra White to be followed by Ruth Davidson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I also thank and congratulate John Mason for securing this debate. 2014 Commonwealth Games is a great opportunity for Glasgow and for Scotland obviously as well, but particularly Glasgow, my home city, and the city centre is in my constituency, to showcase just exactly what this great city has to offer, not just in the buildings and the construction area, but also from the people there as well, and as John Mason said, the whole of Scotland also. I want to touch on some of the regeneration examples which has been happening in the Kelvin constituency, some of the projects, and one of the first projects I have to mention, which has benefited directly from the 2014, is the upgrade of the subway stations. It's been absolutely fantastic, particularly the Hillhead upgrade, and I must mention the mural. I won't dwell too much on the mural at Hillhead, but I do thank SPT and the government. Yes.
Tricia Ferguson.
I would like to, Presiding Officer, if I may, spare Mrs White's blushes, and I thank her for taking the intervention. She would not, of course, herself want to draw attention to the fact she features in the mural, so I thought that I might do that on her behalf. Very fetching it is too, and I did recognise her from the artistic representation.
I thank the member very much for the mention of the mural. As I say, I wanted to congratulate Alistair Gray for the fantastic work that it has done. It's hugely popular, that's all I say, it's hugely popular in the area. The next step for the upgrade is the Kelvin Hall subway station, which obviously is the gateway and opens up to Kelvin Grove Art Galleries and Kelvin Grove Park, where we have excellent facilities, grass facilities there. Particularly the bowling competitions will be held in Kelvin Grove Park, and I was there along with the Minister to open the new bowling greens there, and they are absolutely wonderful. People talk about them all the time. We also have along the River Clyde the walkway. There's going to be transport along there. We're getting an upgrade there, albeit I'd like more money spent on that particular part of particularly at Custom House Quay. But the idea is to be able to walk from the SECC right all the way through to Glasgow Green, cycle, walk, all the way through to Glasgow Green, and then on to the East End. So I'll look forward to that being completed. I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's one issue I wanted to touch on. John Mason mentioned the volunteers, and it's an excellent project, and I'm sure we'll get even more than we asked for. But I would like to ask the Minister, and I've raised this with the Commonwealth 2014 teams. I've been approached by a number of groups in my constituency, and I'm sure other MSPs have also, how they would go about taking part in the opening ceremony. Now, there's some excellent groups in my constituency. There's a dance group, Independent Dance, which is based in the Kelvin constituency, which has people from various levels of disabilities. They performed in the Parliament, absolutely fantastic. It would be wonderful to do that. I also have another group, and I have to say this very carefully. They're called the Partick Pluckers, and they're a group of elderly people who play the banjo and sing, and they're based at Stuartville Street in Partick. They're absolutely wonderful. And there's also the Glasgow Old People's Welfare Association and many, many others. So I would just like perhaps the Minister could let me and others know how they would be involved in perhaps the opening ceremony. And as I've got maybe like 40 seconds left, I would like to ask the Minister, could they possibly get in touch with Glasgow City Council about the regeneration of George Square? I've had a lot of constituents come to me there. It's going to be closed for something like 2 years, and it seems crazy if you're going to look at regeneration, why you don't look at the traffic calming schemes round the square. So I just wonder if the Minister would take up that suggestion. I've certainly put into the consultation, but people are concerned that the square itself is going to be closed off for 2 years, and will it be ready in time for the Commonwealth Games? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Now calling Ruth Davidson to be followed by James Dornan. 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I also congratulate John Mason for securing this afternoon's debate, and I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to speak about an exciting event which can bring the nation together in a positive way behind a common purpose in 2014, and an event that will give Scots across the nation an opportunity to express what is great about this country and the opportunity to promote our national identity while also celebrating competition with and respect for our friends at the home nations. When John was listing off the venues and what was happening at them earlier in his own speech, I was sort of ticking off mentally in my head, yes, I've played table tennis and badminton in Scotstoun, I've done a bit of crown green bowling at Kelvin Grove, and I've used the ranges for shooting at Barrybudden in my previous life in uniform. And while, like most Scots, I am a very, very far cry from Commonwealth standards, I think it will still be a thrill to be able to see these venues being used in future and to look at them on the television and say, I've been there, I've done that. And I think people right across Scotland will share that thrill as well. This afternoon's motion notes the latest progress on the Games from the Co-ordination Commission from the Commonwealth Games Federation, and I am very pleased that it reports a number of venues were either completed or were nearing completion, and that the CGF has confidence in the ability of Glasgow to deliver a successful Games. I share this confidence. The new facilities are speaking for themselves. We have, I believe, 622 days to go, and we appear to be ahead of schedule. And I'm sure that Scotland's largest, friendliest city, my home city and one that I'm very proud to represent, will step up to the challenge of filling the 15,000 volunteering spaces needed to help run the Games. And I would concur with Ms Ferguson's contribution that perhaps a cross-party group of MSP workers could be attached to this volunteering project. Glasgow 2014 will be a global event. It involves 71 nations and territories. It represents 1/3 of the world's population and will attract an estimated TV audience of more than 1.5 billion people from across the globe. Just yesterday, it was announced that Emirates Airlines are to be one of the major sponsors of the Games. And again, I think that's a reflection of Glasgow 2014's international reach. The Games will be good for Glasgow and they will help cement its reputation as a truly world-class city. One other thing I'd like to note is that the Parasports programme is going to be fully integrated into the Games, and that will help Parasports athletes achieve greater exposure on the international sports scene. I think that we are fortunate in many ways that the Commonwealth Games can learn and build upon the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympics in this regard. And I was struck at the recent Commonwealth Games reception that's been referred to several times before, how appreciative the Glasgow 2014 organisers are for the access, the support and the co-working that they've had with LOCOG, and that has been ongoing. We know that 41% of Scots are more interested now in the Commonwealth Games because of London 2012, and we need to build on that. However, for me, the Games are going to be much more than a sporting event, because it represents a real opportunity to use sport to benefit businesses, organisations and communities across Scotland, and also to instil a lasting legacy on young people in Scotland. The venues will continue to be used after the Games by a variety of athletes, from elite competitors to young people who've been inspired to take up a new sport. Event Scotland's Games for Scotland initiative has already seen 40,000 people trying Commonwealth Games and sports activities in 2010 and 11, and I hope this trend continues. So the legacy of these Games can and should extend beyond the physical infrastructure of the houses, of the events, of the venues. And for every person that gets off the sofa, every child inspired by a new sport, every Scot proud to cheer on our athletes, and for every inch of progress that we make as a nation to see into practice the benefits of exercise in our own communities. It's a legacy worth competing for, and I congratulate the member on securing this debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now calling James Dornan, to be followed by Anne McTaggart. 4 minutes, please.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I'd also like to thank John for bringing this debate to the Chamber. John Mason is part of the reason why I'm so happy to talk and take part in this debate. When I first became a councillor, John was a council group leader. One of the first things we did was we discussed outside bodies that we'd like to be on, and I was fortunate enough to get onto the Culture and Sport Board. The benefit of that was manifold. I saw parts of Glasgow that we had, treasures in the city that I hadn't realised that we had. But also, I was fortunate in timing in terms of I managed to meet a lot of the Commonwealth delegates. Now, every Commonwealth delegate I met was incredibly positive about Glasgow. They were positive about the facilities that we had. They were positive about the legacy that we were looking for after the Games. But mostly, they were positive about Glaswegians. They were positive about the warm welcome that they got, the enthusiasm from people in the city to the Games and what they can bring to the Games, and also what the Games could bring to the city. So I believe firmly that if it hadn't been for that well-known, warm, generous Glaswegian spirit, that we may well have struggled to get the Games to Glasgow in the first place. Can't count the amount of times he spoke to me about the welcome they received, and that's why I'm so confident that the Games will be a massive success. But I want to speak about what the Games will mean in my constituency, both for my constituency but also to the visitors to my constituency. I'm very fortunate in that I have 3 of the biggest events in 2 of the great venues, Hampden, home of Scottish football, and just a javelin throw away from my constituency office, which is not a suggestion, by the way, is hosting both the track and field events and the closing ceremony, which I'm confident will be something to behold. And Catherine Braes, as has already been mentioned, with its extraordinary panoramic views of the city, will be hosting the mountain biking event. This will be Glasgow's first international standard mountain bike course, and will give the city a world-class venue to both watch the sport during the Games and as a community facility in a rapidly growing sport once the Games are over. Hampden's likely to see many Olympic champions we're all fating after the recent Games. Stars such as Jessica Ennis, Usain Bolt and our very own Eilidh Childs have committed themselves to appearing. And of course, many years ago, Hampden used to host athletics events, and the great Eric Liddell's last win in British soil took place here in 1925. No, I wasn't there, but I suspect this one is going to be on a slightly grander scale. And whilst Cathcart has this welcome influx of visitors, they could do worse than spend their time just looking at all we have to offer. From the last conservation village in Glasgow city boundary at Carmunnock, dating back to the early Christian missionary St Cadoc, and passing on to the hands of the Stuart family in 1700, who also owned large swathes of Castlemalt. And if you visit Castlemalt Stables, which I believe that the Minister may well have been to before, you will see some of the remnants of that and later periods. It's well worth a visit to a place now owned by a housing association and well used by the community. At the other end of the constituency with Pollock Park, one of Europe's best park in 2008, UK's best park in 2006, and home to the magnificent Borough collection. Just down from here, you've the A-listed Pollockshaw's Borough Hall, built and paid for by Sir John Stirling Maxwell, in time to celebrate Queen Victoria's Jubilee, which also hosts a magnificent Wurlitzer organ, which I saw just the other day in the 200th anniversary of the Pollockshaws. Close by Sir John Maxwell School, built in 1854, but much more importantly, famous for the fact that the great John Maclean used to teach Marxism to packed night classes. But probably the most important part of Cathcart's history lies in the Battle of Langside. It's no exaggeration to say that if this battle between the forces of Mary Queen of Scots and her half-brother James Stuart had turned out differently, and Mary hadn't had to flee to England to seek refuge from her cousin Elizabeth, and we all know what happened then, many of the constitutional debates we've been having and will continue to have over the next 2 years may not have been necessary. Historic Scotland are considering whether to make battlefield area of my constituency part of their historic battlefields, and clearly this is a proposal which is my
If you draw to a close, please.
Yes. Presiding Officer, due to time constraints, I've had to miss out so many great places to visit in the constituency, but I will say that if all you want from your visits a nice meal, a quiet drink or an evening out, Cathcart's constituency also has these in abundance. I'm confident Glasgow is going to host a magnificent Games and have no doubt my constituency will play more than its fair share in the forthcoming success of these Games.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now Colin Ann McTaggart to be followed by Jamie Hepburn. 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am delighted to contribute to the debate on 2014 Commonwealth Games, and I thank John Mason for bringing to the Chamber the issues of Glasgow's preparation for the event and also about the legacy the Games will leave behind. I too am excited by the huge opportunities that hosting the Commonwealth Games will bring to the City of Glasgow and for all of Scotland. Already we can see sport and extracurricular activities becoming a focus for many schools and community groups. In Drumchapel, Cumstradin Primary School has recently been awarded a grant of £2,000 by the Big Lottery Fund, which they will be using to develop sporting activities and opportunities for all of their pupils. I know that parents, pupils and teachers work together to secure this funding, and together they will enjoy the benefits this will bring for the wider community in Drumchapel and indeed for Glasgow. This is not an isolated example of the enthusiasm that is building for the Commonwealth Games, and I know that many of my constituents will be keen to volunteer for the duration of the Games in a variety of different roles. Organisers are now advertising, and I'm glad that a few have signed up already from the Chamber, over 15,000 voluntary positions similar to the Games makers of the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And already there had been significant interests of public being involved in this way. I'm also delighted at the preparations that are already ongoing to ensure that there is a strong and meaningful legacy for Scotland after the Games end. The Youth Legacy Ambassador Programme is a joint initiative between the Scottish Government, Young Scot and others will be promoting the wider involvement of communities in the Commonwealth Games events. It will seek to host events all over Scotland to make the Games of 2014 relevant to all of those who want to be involved in it. In every local authority in Scotland, there are 2 Youth Legacy Ambassadors who undertake this work, promoting activism and involvement in sport amongst their peers. Of course, only time we will know how successful this programme will be. But if the hard work and enthusiasm of the young people is any indication of its success, we can look beyond 2014 with optimism. I believe that communities in Glasgow and across the whole of Scotland will benefit hugely from the Commonwealth Games. The impact of the Games could last for generations, and it falls upon us to secure the benefits for our children, our grandchildren to enjoy. We can already see that much of the new infrastructure in stadia is transforming parts of the East End of Glasgow, and we must ensure that this process does not slow or falter between now and 2014. I look forward to the Commonwealth Games with anticipation, optimism and, most importantly, pride in my city of Glasgow and the ability of Scotland to host a fantastic international sporting event.
Excellent. Many thanks. Now call on Jamie Hepburn, after which we'll move to the Minister.
Thank you very much, President Officer. Can I join with others in congratulating John Mason on securing today's debate? And I quite understand that there is obviously great excitement in my native city of Glasgow about the coming Games. 2014 is obviously going to be a very important year for the city, and we're seeing a lot of regeneration work undertaken, a transformation in the East End that John Mason spoke of in terms of the social housing that we left there. Of course, there's going to be work on Dolmarnock Station as well, and there's going to be tremendous facilities left for the city of Glasgow. And indeed, we've already, I think Ruth Davidson mentioned Scotstoun Leisure Centre, as it is known now. We've seen over a number of years transformation there. Back in the day it was known as Scotstoun Showground, and I can certainly confirm there's been a great transformation since the day I rather reluctantly had to do cross-country running there as a schoolboy. So it's going to be a fantastic facility, one of many fantastic facilities for the city. Of course, it's not just Glasgow that's looking forward to the Commonwealth Games. It is an event for the whole country, and I think John Mason rightly recognised that in his speech, and also indeed in terms of the motion. I thought it was right to say that it was Scotland's chance to shine, as his motion did set out. And of course, many folk across the country will have their chance to play their part with the 15,000 volunteers that are being sought, and I particularly wish John Mason and Patricia Ferguson well in their application to become such a volunteer. Can I say, President Officer, my own constituency has already made its mark on the Commonwealth Games. AG Bar was mentioned earlier. They're going to be a sponsor of the event, and of course they're based in my constituency at the Westfield Industrial Estate in Cumbernauld. And as well, the mascot Clyde has merited a mention. I think it would be remiss of me to fail to mention that it was 12-year-old Beth Gilmer from Cumbernauld who had her design chosen for the Commonwealth Games mascot, and she did very well because it was selected following a UK-wide competition that attracted over 4,000 entries. I think it was described as a UK-wide competition. I understand it actually attracted entries from across the world. I'm sure other members would join me in congratulating Beth on having had her design chosen. I would also reflect that the mascot shares a name with the only senior football team in my constituency. I'm sure John Mason, as a supporter of that team, will be particularly happy in that regard. And also the fact that Clyde is a Thistle, it was warmly welcome for me because it reflects my own footballing loyalties, and I'm sure Patricia Ferguson shares that welcomes well. I can also say as an aside, and I hadn't planned to mention this because I didn't know it until I came to the chamber, but Colin Keir had a copy of the Edinburgh Evening News, and there's a rather touching photograph on page 4. I'd encourage all members to look at it, of Clyde in a very warm and tender embrace with our First Minister. Only he can, of course, say that betrays any of his own political preferences, of course. Can I move on, because of course it's not just Glasgow that's looking forward to the Games, it's not just Glasgow that's going to secure a legacy through the Commonwealth Games. I think we've all received the Legacy 2014 booklet, and I was very glad to see it talking of the over £13.5 million invested in the Active Schools initiative, which is giving school-aged children the opportunity to participate in a wide variety of sports out with their formal physical education classes at school, and there are going to be 150 community sports hubs in place by 2016. That's fantastic for the whole country. And just to close by bringing it back to my own constituency, as I think I should do, President Officer, there's going to be a legacy for my area in that the Cumbernauld Railway line is going to be electrified in time for the Commonwealth Games, allowing people to get in and out of Glasgow with a greater degree of ease. But of course that will be there for the long term, and my constituents will benefit by that. So I think it's good news all round that we've got the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow in 2014. And I once more congratulate John Mason on today's debate.
Many thanks. Now calling the Minister, Sir Robertson, to close the debate on behalf of the Government. When you're ready, 7 minutes, please.
Okay, well, can I also begin by thanking John Mason for bringing forward this very timely debate. Been some very good speeches and some suggestions today, and I will try to respond to as many as possible. If I don't, I can assure members that they have all been noted. In response to this motion, I'm glad, Presiding Officer, that this Parliament has noted, and many have paid notice to this within their speeches, about the third successful visit of the Co-ordination Commission for the 2014 Games. I was very pleased that the Chairman of the Commission expressed his view that our Games preparations were the best he had seen in 20 years. That's very reassuring, but of course we will not be complacent. There's more work to be done, and that work will be stepping up a pace as we get into the last home straight. He also said, which I think is important, that our legacy preparations were a model for other countries to follow. And I think members have made mention of this, that as well as a fantastic Games, which of course they will be, the legacy is of equal importance, that we make sure that there's a legacy for the whole of Scotland from these games. But I hope that members will have had the chance to look at some detail on the progress report, which I've sent a copy to all members. There have been a lot of recent events. Some members paid attention to those in their speeches. The completion, obviously, of the Commonwealth Arena and the Sir Chris Hoy Velodrome. For those of you who haven't had a chance to go and look at those venues, I would really encourage you to. They are absolutely fantastic. We've had the unveiling of Clyde, which I think has received absolute unanimous coming together in praise for the concept. He's absolutely fantastic, really, really good. I think one of the best mascots that I've certainly seen in any games to date. We've had a lot of sponsors coming on board. Most recent partner, Emirates Airlines, joined the Commonwealth Games family just yesterday. And again, a very important part of the revenue raising for the Games, and the target, of course, of £99 million being raised through sponsorship. So that is important. And earlier this week, I attended the opening of the Volunteer Centre at Commonwealth House in Glasgow, with the target, of course, of 15,000 volunteers at the Games. And I would encourage members to go and have a look at the Volunteer Centre, and it's pleasing to hear so many people wanting to volunteer themselves. I think that is a very good thing indeed. So we do remain firmly on course, but as I said earlier, we're not going to be complacent. There's a lot to be done over the next 20 months. The Olympic Games, as referred to by Ruth Davidson, have given us an opportunity to learn all the lessons that we can from that experience, and that has been very helpful indeed. And the momentum that we can now keep going for those 20 months to roll on to 2014 is really, really important. I want to take the opportunity just to respond to as many members as I can. I thought John Mason made a very important point about the more than gold involvement of the churches, because it is fair to say that there are some countries sending athletes who are very poor countries, who struggle, and I think any support that can be given, particularly to those athletes and their families indeed when they're over, is very welcome indeed. He also made the point that housing isn't enough in terms of the regeneration of an area, and the Games are very important in the catalyst to regeneration, particularly of the East End of Glasgow, and I've seen some of the real tangible evidence of that, and that is really important. Patricia Ferguson made a very important point about the cooperation and the partnership working being very important and being picked up by the Commonwealth Games Federation, and that is very important to all of us. The north of Glasgow, I think what I would say to Patricia Ferguson about this is, as well as obviously being very interested in the Pinkston Paddle Centre, and there's a lot of work going on around that, is of course that the Youth Olympic Games bid will have having a very direct benefit to the north of Glasgow. Even if we don't win the bid, it has been a catalyst to the early regeneration of that part of the north of Glasgow. So hopefully she'll take comfort in that. And also, of course, the £10 million Active Places Fund, which is open to all communities to apply for. Sandra talked about the upgrade of the subway. I want to see this mural, Sandra. I haven't seen the mural, but I am going to now. Her question about how organisations and groups can get involved, to say to her that the contract for the ceremonies has now been awarded, but I'll certainly pass on her comments about how to involve that wider group of people and organisations that want to be involved in some way. The regeneration of George Square, slightly outside my remit, but I'll certainly make the point to our Games partners, Glasgow City Council, obviously about the need for that work to be completed in time for the Games. Ruth Davidson said that the new facilities are speaking for themselves. I agree, and I think they do. And the fact there are so many events pre-Commonwealth Games booked into those venues tells its own story. I thought James Dornan did a fantastic job of promotion of his constituency, but also reminded us of the athletics history of Hampden and, of course, Eric Liddell in 1925, and that is great. Anne McTaggart, I think, again highlighted the Youth Legacy Ambassador programme, a real opportunity for young people to be involved, but also to involve other young people, and that is a great success story. And Jamie Hepburn talked about the Games being an event for the whole of Scotland, very important, and of course paid tribute to 12-year-old Beth Gilmer, who has done a fantastic job in designing the mascot. He also talked about two important aspects of what's going on within our schools in the present time. The Active Schools Network is a real success story, but added to that are the 150 Community Sports Hub programme, a key legacy ambition, half of which, of course, will be based within schools, opening up schools to being open after school hours and really getting the school estate open for business as we want it to be. Just to say, there will be an opportunity to go into these matters in a bit more detail before the end of the year, because I want to bring forward a wider debate on the Games preparations. So hopefully that will give an opportunity for more members to be involved in discussing the preparations for the Commonwealth Games and, of course, the legacy benefits for the whole of Scotland, which will undoubtedly flow from us hosting those Games. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, and thank you all. I now close this meeting of Parliament. No, I don't. I suspend it until 2:30.